All right, hello, welcome back, everybody. PayPal and Patreon are down below if you want to support me. Only do so if you actually can. And if you'd like to see or access the graphs shown in this video, there's a link, as always, in the description to a Drive folder. That folder contains not only these graphs, but all kinds of other graphs across all kinds of different energy and natural resource related subjects. The power generation breakdown by source for at least a number of countries, the larger power consumers, has been released a bit early. So we're going to be going through that now. And in terms of global total power demand across all grids combined, we have we have climbed up from last year in a global average from 3.4 up to averaging 3.52 terawatts of electricity demand across the grids of the world at any given time. The global collective total breaks down as follows. As of this year, 34.5% is coal-fired generation, 22% is generated by gas-fired power plants, 14.5% came from hydropower or hydro dams. 9% now comes from nuclear plants. 8% is currently coming from wind power. 7% from solar, which then breaks down into solar versus solar thermal, which is the better of the two solars. 3% still from oil-fired power generation. Unfortunately, only 0.5% from geothermal and 1.5% from a mixture of other. China, the largest power consumer, is still dominated by coal-fired power generation at 58%. At 58%, hydropower coming in now at 13.5. Wind came in. Wind is now at 10. Solar at 8. Nuclear accounting for 4% of their generation, gas-fired power plants only for 3, and 3.5% coming from other or unspecified. For the US, gas-fired power generation continues to climb upwards in its dominance at 42.5% now, nuclear accounting for 18%, coal down to 15%, wind power now in the double digits at 10.5, solar at 7% with a mixture of solar and solar thermal, hydropower generation down to only 5.5%, oil fired down to 0.5, geothermal unfortunately still at only 0.5, and 0.5 unlisted or other. The third largest power consumer, India, is dominated by coal at 74.5%. Hydropower comes in next, way down at 7.5, solar at 6.5, wind at 4%, gas-fired at 3%, nuclear at 2.5%, although that will be going upwards over the next decade or so, and 2% as other. Fourth largest consumer, Russia, has gas as the largest source of power at 44.5%, coal at 18.5%, nuclear at 18%, hydropower at 17.5%, and then 1% is still coming from oil-fired power generation and 0.5% from other. For the European countries, for the EU as a whole, in the European total, nuclear is actually Europe's biggest source of power, which is good. The best source of power, the most reliable, most indefinite source of power, next to geothermal. Nuclear accounts for 24% of Europe's power generation, wind percent accounts for 7, gas-fired power accounts for 16%, hydropower 13, solar 11, coal down to 10, oil-fired surprisingly came in at 3%, and other at 6%. Now, the individual countries within Europe, Germany, Deutschland, the largest consumer within Europe, its power generation came in at wind 28%, coal 22, gas-fired power 16.5, solar 15, hydro 5%, oil-fired 4%, and other 9.5%. France coming in strong with 68% nuclear power, hydropower 12.5, wind power 7.5, solar 4, gas-fired 3.5, oil-fired power generation 2%, coal 0.5, and 2% other. The UK had its strongest wind year ever, coming in at now a third of power coming from wind, 33%, gas-fired power accounting for 30%, nuclear 14.5, solar 5.5. You guys are way too cloudy and at way too high of a latitude to be playing around with solar panels. Oil fired 3.5, hydro 2%, coal 1%, and 13.5% coming from other. Spain is up to 22.5% wind power, 21% solar, and also being one of the few who actually is utilizing some portion of solar thermal as well. Nuclear power 19.5, gas fired 18.5, hydro 11.5, oil fired power 3.5%, coal 1%, and 2.5% other. Poland, Polska at coal 53.5%, wind up to 14.5, gas fired 12, solar 9, oil fired 4.5, hydropower 1.5%, and 5% other. Italy, Italia, coming in with gas fired power generation 44%, hydropower 19%, solar 13.5, wind 8.5, oil fired 5%, geothermal 2%. Nice, got to take that higher though. Coal 2% and 6% other. And the last one from Europe, at least to be included in the video, is Netherlands, coming in with gas-fired power generation making up 36%, wind power 27%, solar 17.5, coal 6.5, oil 3.5, nuclear 3%, and 6.5% other. And then back out of Europe to large power producers and consumers elsewhere. Japan coming in at 34% gas-fired power generation, 32% coal, solar 10, nuclear 8.5, getting close to going back up into double digits as Japan is bringing its nuclear reactors back online. Hydropower 7.5, oil fired 2.5, wind 1, geothermal 0.5, and 4% other. Brazil, dominated by hydropower, as everybody knows, coming in at 55.5%. Wind power up to 14.5%. Solar 10, gas-fired 6.5, nuclear 2, coal 2, oil-fired 1.5, and 8% other. Canada also dominated by hydro at 55.5% as well. Gas-fired coming in at 15.5, nuclear 13.5, wind power 7%, coal 4%, solar 1.5. You guys are also at way too high of latitude to be using solar panels. Oil fired at 1 and 2% other. South Korea coming in with nuclear as the strongest at 30.5, coal at 30%, gas fired at 28, solar at 5.5, oil fired at 1.5, hydropower at 0.5, wind power at 0.5, and 3% other. And Saudi Arabia's power generation mix is a short list as it always is. Gas is now up to accounting for 65% of power generation, up from 62 the previous year, with oil-fired power generation now down to comprising only 32%, down from 38, and solar comprising 3%. Mexico is dominated by gas-fired power generation at 61%, oil-fired coming in at 8%, solar at 7.5, hydro at 6.5, coal and wind are both at 6%, nuclear at 3.5, and 1.5% other. And then Indonesia, we still need completely finalized stuff. So these should be close, but if not, they're the rough numbers. Coming in with coal now up to comprising 2/3 of their power production at about 66%. Gas-fired should still be around 17. Hydro around 7, maybe 8. Geothermal at 5%. Oil fired at 1.5. Solar and wind each at 0.5 and 2.5% other. And then Turkey is a more even mix than some others, coming in with coal at 35.5%, hydropower 22%, gas-fired 18.5, wind up to 10.5, solar 7.5, geothermal 3, got a lot more potential to go there, so you need to bring that one up. Oil fired at 3 and 2.5% other. Taiwan giving everyone even more clear indicators that the invasion from China is pretty imminent, likely this year or next. But over the last few years, they have dialed their reactors down, as if they're doing something just in case. As of this year, they are 43.5% gas fired, 40% coal fired, 5% solar, down to 4% nuclear, 3.5% wind, 1.5% oil fired, 1.5% hydro, and 1% other. Kazakhstan is predominantly coal still at 55%, 28% gas-fired power generation, 9.5% hydropower, wind at 3.5, oil fired at 2, solar at 1.5, and 0.5% other. Pakistan is at 25% gas-fired, 19% hydropower, 14.5% oil fired, 14% coal, 13.5% nuclear, 10.5% solar, 3% wind, and 0.5% other. Australia is at 45.5% coal, 18% solar, 17% gas, 11.5% wind, 5% hydropower, 2% oil fired, and 1% other. The Philippines is predominantly coal at 62.5%, followed by gas-fired power generation at 14%, hydropower 8.5, geothermal 8%, solar 3%, oil-fired 1.5, wind 1, and 1.5% other. And Morocco is 59.5% coal, wind power up to 21%, gas-fired 10%, oil-fired 4%, solar thermal exclusively 3.5%, 1.5% hydro, and 0.5% other. Nigeria is a short list split, 77% gas-fired, 23% hydro. Egypt is predominantly gas-fired at 81.5, 6.5% oil-fired, 6% hydro, 3% wind, 2.5% solar, and 0.5% other. South Africa is predominantly coal, 82%, solar at 8%, some of which is solar thermal, wind 4.5, nuclear 3.5, oil fired 1, and hydro and other both at 0.5. Vietnam is just under half coal at 49%, 31.5% hydropower, solar power 8.5, gas-fired 7, and wind 4%. Malaysia is coal 43%, gas 36.5, hydropower 17, solar 2%, oil-fired 0.5, and 1% other. Argentina is predominantly gas at 54%, hydropower comprising 16.5, wind power up to 11, nuclear at 7, oil fired at 6 still, solar at 2.5, coal at 1, and 2% other. Thailand is predominantly gas fired also at 68.5%, with 16.5% coal fired and hydropower 3%, solar 3%, wind 2%, and then 7% other. And then I believe the last one for the video at least, Iran is overwhelmingly gas-fired at 80% gas-fired power generation, oil-fired 11.5%, hydropower 5.5, nuclear 1.5, wind 0.5, and 1% other. And actually, last on the list, Algeria still has not given the latest numbers, but they are unlikely to have really changed as their newest power stuff is not coming online until late this year. So they would likely basically come in at the same numbers as the year before, at which they were overwhelmingly gas-fired power generation at 98.5%, 1% solar, and 0.5% oil-fired. All right, that's it for this one. Thank you, everybody, for sticking around and listening. Like if you enjoyed, subscribe if you haven't already. PayPal and Patreon are down there if you want to support me. Only do so if you actually can. There's a link to the Google Drive folder in the description that has these graphs and all kinds of other graphs that are free to access and use. Any support helps with the maintenance of those and those databases as well. There's links to my photography, to my Blue Sky, and one in the top pinned comment to my cat's YouTube channel. May God bless and protect all of you, and I will see you all around next time.